Did you know that one of the scariest moments in Deep Red was never supposed to be in the movie at all? It happened by accident, and the director decided to keep it. Deep Red, released in 1975, is one of the most talked about horror films ever made in Italy. But behind its haunting music and shocking scenes, there are secrets most fans have never heard. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about Deep Red. Number 20. The movie almost had a different director here is something that surprises almost everyone. Deep Red, known in Italy as Profondo Rosso, was not originally going to be directed by Dario Argento at all. Other directors were being considered in the early stages of the project. Argento had already built a reputation with his earlier thriller films, but when he came fully on board for Deep Red, something shifted immediately. He did not just want to make another thriller. He wanted the camera to move like a living creature, always watching, always hunting. He wanted the colors to scream and the music to crawl under your skin. His obsessive energy touched every decision, from set designs to lighting to the way actors moved through a scene. What started as a project in search of a director became one of the most personal horror films ever made. One director's passion turned a simple project into a masterpiece. Number 19. The script was rewritten many times. Most people think great movies begin with a perfect script. Deep Red tells a very different story. Dario Argento worked alongside writer Bernardino Zappini, but the two were constantly revising and reimagining scenes. Characters were added, then removed. Plot twists were invented, then thrown away. Some scenes were written 3 or 4 times before anyone felt satisfied. Argento believed a script should breathe and be willing to change right up until the cameras started rolling. One of the most famous changes involved the identity of the killer. The clues planted throughout the film were carefully rearranged multiple times so the audience would never guess too early. By the time filming began, the script was lean and sharp and full of surprises. Pages of earlier drafts sat in a pile, full of ideas that never made it to the screen. A good story always costs more than people see. Number 18. David Hemmings was cast because of one film. The lead actor in Deep Red is David Hemmings, a British actor who plays Marcus Daly, a musician who witnesses a brutal murder and becomes obsessed with solving it. The answer to why Hemmings was cast goes back to a single film. In 1966, Hemmings starred in Michelangelo Antonioni's Blow Up, playing a photographer who believes he may have accidentally captured a murder on film. He had a particular quality on screen: intelligent but uncertain, brave but fragile. Argento saw exactly that quality and knew Hemmings was right for Marcus. What made the casting even more interesting was the echo between the two films. In Blow Up, Hemmings plays a man who thinks he sees a murder in a photograph but cannot prove it. In Deep Red, he plays a man who sees a murder in real life but cannot remember the crucial detail that would solve the case. Both characters are trapped by what they think they saw. Some actors are born to play certain kinds of confusion. Hemmings was one of them. Number 17. The music was created before filming finished. In most films, the music comes last. Deep Red did something completely different, and this decision changed the entire feeling of the film. Argento was a huge music fan, particularly passionate about rock music. When developing Deep Red, he reached out to a progressive rock band called Goblin for their first major film score. Argento shared his ideas with the band early, before shooting had even finished, and Goblin began composing while the film was still being made. Because the music existed before some scenes were finalized, certain scenes were actually shaped around the music rather than the other way around. The pounding, hypnotic main theme of Deep Red became one of the most recognized pieces of music in horror film history. It builds slowly, then crashes over you like a wave. Argento used the music almost as a weapon, letting scenes go quiet and then bringing the theme crashing back at the worst possible moment. Music written before the ending helped create an ending no one forgot. Number 16. A real murder scene inspired. The opening horror films often draw their ideas from dark places, but the opening murder sequence in Deep Red has a particularly unsettling origin. While developing the film, Argento studied actual crime cases, reading police reports, and examining crime scene photographs. He was not interested in copying specific crimes. He was interested in understanding how violence happens, the speed of it, the shock of it, the way it changes a space forever. Italy in the early 1970s was a country dealing with significant political violence and social unrest. Crime felt close and real. Argento channeled that cultural anxiety into his film, making violence feel neither glamorous nor distant. It was right there, in a house, on a quiet street, behind a lighted window. Some people walked out of early screenings. Others sat in silence long after the credits rolled. Real life made the fiction feel more true. Number 15. The film was shot in Turin, not Rome. Most people assume an Italian horror film made in the 1970s would be filmed in Rome, but Argento made a very deliberate choice to shoot Deep Red almost entirely in Turin, and that choice shaped the entire visual identity of the film. Turin is a city in northern Italy with wide, austere avenues, tall, imposing buildings, and a history connected to industry rather than ancient grandeur. It also has a strong tradition in Italian mysticism and occult history, something that felt very appropriate for a story about hidden secrets and dark psychology. The architecture gave the film its particular coldness. Buildings seem to loom over the characters, pressing down on them. Streets feel deserted even when they should be full of life. Turin also has a long-standing reputation as one of the most mystically significant cities in Europe. Whether deserved or not, it suited Argento's vision perfectly. The city whispered its secrets into every frame. Number 14. A key clue was hidden in plain sight. One of the most remarkable things about Deep Red is the way it hides its central clue completely in the open. Early in the film, Marcus passes a particular location and sees something that should tell him everything he needs to know about the killer. The clue is there, clear and visible for any audience member paying close enough attention. And yet, almost no one sees it. They look right at it and walk past it, exactly like Marcus does. Argento filmed it in a way that draws your eye elsewhere, to something more dramatic and obviously interesting, while the real clue sits quietly at the edge of the frame. When audiences discovered the trick on a second viewing, the reaction was a mixture of admiration and frustration. This technique speaks to one of Argento's deepest interests as a filmmaker, the gap between seeing and understanding. You can look at something 100 times and still not comprehend what it means. It felt like a magic trick. It was a magic trick. And the magician never blinked. Number 13. The female lead changed the story. The character of Gianna Brezzi, played by Dario Argento, was not originally written the way she appears in the finished film. Gianna is a journalist, sharp, funny, independent, and clearly more competent than the male lead in many situations. For a horror film made in 1975, this was genuinely unusual. Women in horror films of that era were far more commonly written as victims who needed rescuing. Dario Argento was Argento's romantic partner at the time, and she actively contributed to shaping how Gianna was written and performed. She pushed back against moments that felt passive or weak for the character. Argento listened. There is a wonderful scene where Gianna and Marcus arm wrestle to settle a small argument. She wins. It is played with lightness and humor, but the moment carries real meaning. In a film full of violence and darkness, here is a woman who competes, wins, and laughs about it. Not every hero carries a weapon. Some carry a notebook and ask better questions. Number 12. The doll in the film terrified the cast. There is a puppet used in certain scenes of Deep Red that became genuinely frightening, not just for the audience, but for the people working on the film. The prop was created specifically for the production and designed to look deeply unsettling. It has a fixed, painted face and moves in a jerky, mechanical way that triggers something primal in the human brain. Psychologists call this effect the uncanny valley, the uncomfortable space between something that is human and something that is not quite human enough. Several crew members reported feeling deeply uneasy around the doll, even knowing rationally it was harmless. One technician reportedly refused to be in the same room as it when the lights went down. Argento kept the prop on set throughout the entire production, even when it was not being used. He believed its presence changed the atmosphere in subtle ways that would eventually show up on screen. The doll scenes remain among the most disturbing moments in the film. What could not move still somehow followed your eyes. Number 11. The film was edited differently for international release here is a fact that frustrates many dedicated fans of Deep Red. The original Italian cut of the film runs for roughly 2 hours and 7 minutes. The international version, particularly for English-speaking countries, was cut down to closer to 1 hour and 40 minutes. Nearly 30 minutes of story was removed. Some of the cut material includes important character development for Marcus, additional scenes between Gianna and Marcus that deepen their relationship, and several moments that add psychological texture to the mystery. Without these scenes, the shorter version feels like a conventional thriller rather than the complex psychological portrait Argento intended. When the full-length Italian version eventually became widely available through home video and restoration projects, fans who had only seen the shorter cut were genuinely stunned by what they had been missing. Some scenes they had never seen fundamentally changed how they understood certain characters. What was cut out was not just minutes, it was meaning. Number 10. The house in the film was a real location with a dark history. There's a specific house featured prominently in Deep Red, a crumbling, abandoned villa that carries genuine history beyond the film. The building had stood empty for a number of years before production began. Local people who lived nearby had their own stories about it, rumors, whispered histories, suggestions of things that had happened there long before any film crew arrived. The crew who worked there for extended periods reported an ongoing sense of unease that had nothing to do with the horror they were filming. The building had strange acoustics, sounds echoed oddly, sometimes seeming to come from walls rather than their actual source. The light inside behaved unexpectedly, creating shadows that moved in ways technicians could not always explain. Argento preferred not to question these things. If the location was already doing half the work of creating atmosphere, why argue with it? Some of the most genuinely unnerving shots in Deep Red were barely directed at all. Old walls remember everything they have ever witnessed. Number 9. Argento studied Hitchcock obsessively before making this film. Dario Argento has never hidden his admiration for Alfred Hitchcock, and nowhere is that influence more visible than in Deep Red. Before writing and directing the film, Argento reportedly watched a large number of Hitchcock's films multiple times, studying not just the stories, but the specific technical choices, where the camera was placed, when it moved, what it chose to show, and what it deliberately refused to show. Hitchcock believed that what an audience imagines is always more frightening than what they actually see. Argento absorbed this lesson deeply, but then pushed it further. He was more willing to show violence directly. But the fundamental architecture of his storytelling, the slow reveal, the misdirected clue, the ordinary person pulled into extraordinary darkness, these came directly from his study of Hitchcock. There are specific shots in Deep Red that feel like direct conversations with Hitchcock's work. Argento took Hitchcock's chess game and added electricity and color and screaming music. A student learned from a master and then broke every rule they had been taught. Number 8. The violence was choreographed like dance. This might be the most surprising fact about Deep Red. The violent sequences in the film were planned and rehearsed with the same level of care that a choreographer brings to a dance performance. Argento worked with his actors and stunt coordinators to break down each violent sequence into precise movements. Where was each person's body at each moment? How did the camera need to move? What was the rhythm of the sequence? This approach produced something strange and fascinating on screen. The violence in Deep Red has an almost aesthetic quality. It is horrifying, but it is also oddly beautiful in the way that extreme weather is beautiful. The choreography meant that actors knew exactly what was happening at every moment, which freed up their mental energy for the emotion of the scene. Some sequences took days of rehearsal for moments that lasted only seconds on screen. The result looked chaotic. It was anything but. Every scream had a step number. Number 7. The film launched Goblin to international fame before Deep Red. Goblin was a talented but largely unknown progressive rock band. The commission to score the film changed everything for them and changed horror film music forever. Argento gave Goblin unusual creative freedom. He communicated the emotional atmosphere he wanted, dread, something ancient and wrong, and then stepped back to let the musicians find their own way there. The result was a score that sounded unlike anything else in cinema at the time. Goblin blended rock energy with classical structure and electronic experimentation. The main theme has a driving rhythm that feels simultaneously exciting and threatening. Many people reported that the music alone gave them nightmares. After Deep Red's success, Goblin went on to score several more Argento films, including Suspiria, which brought them worldwide attention. But Deep Red was where the magic first started. 5 musicians in a studio wrote The Sound of Fear. Number 6. Argento used a specific color system throughout the film. Dario Argento is famous for his use of color, and Deep Red is one of the earliest and most sophisticated examples of his visual philosophy. Argento worked with his director of photography, Luigi Cuvier, to develop a specific color system that carried emotional and narrative meaning throughout the film. Red appeared at moments of violence and danger. Blue was used in moments of confusion and psychological disorientation. Yellow and amber appeared in scenes connected to memory and the past, giving those moments a feverish, distorted quality. The idea was that even if you were not consciously aware of these choices, your brain was registering and responding to them emotionally. Argento believed that cinema worked on the audience below the level of conscious thought, and color was one of the most powerful tools for reaching that deeper level. What you saw on screen was never an accident. Every color was a sentence in a language the audience felt but could not quite read. The film painted fear before it showed it. Number 5. The film was initially misunderstood by critics. When Deep Red was first released in Italy in 1975, the critical reception was mixed. Some reviewers recognized immediately that they were watching something exceptional, but many others were dismissive, seeing the violence and genre trappings and deciding the film was simply exploitation cinema. Horror was not taken seriously by mainstream film criticism in that era. Reviewers had decided in advance what kind of movie it was and reviewed the movie they expected to see rather than the one actually in front of them. Audiences, however, responded with enormous enthusiasm, and Deep Red became a significant box office success. Over the following years, critical opinion began to shift. As more serious film scholars studied Italian horror cinema, Deep Red was reassessed and recognized as a landmark work. Today it is widely considered not just a great horror film, but a significant achievement in cinema as a whole. The crowd knew first. The critics came later. Number 4. A famous scene was almost cut for being too disturbing. There is a particular scene in Deep Red, one that most fans consider among the most memorable in the entire film, that almost did not survive the editing process. Some members of the production team argued it was simply too much, too graphic, too extended, too likely to attract unwanted attention from censors. Italy had an active film censorship board at the time, and films that pushed too hard could face cuts or outright bans. Argento fought to keep it. He argued that removing it would damage the film's integrity, that the wrongness of the scene was precisely what made it necessary. The debate went on for some time. Eventually, Argento prevailed. When Deep Red was released and audiences responded so powerfully to exactly that sequence, it became clear his instinct had been correct. The scene that almost disappeared is now the scene people remember first. It is discussed in film schools and analyzed by scholars. The cut that was never made cut the deepest. Number 3. The film explores childhood trauma in a hidden way. Deep Red is much more than a murder mystery with spectacular violence. Underneath the thriller structure, there is a deeply serious exploration of how childhood trauma shapes adult behavior. The film suggests that violence in the present is always connected to something that happened in the past, a wound that never properly healed, a terrible event that a child witnessed and could not process. Argento handles this psychological dimension with unusual care. He never reduces it to simple explanation or tidy resolution. The past in Deep Red is not just backstory. It is a living force that keeps reaching forward, distorting everything it touches. Certain shots linger on children's drawings, old photographs, and objects from a world of childhood that no longer exists. The abandoned house in the film is full of decaying traces of former domestic life, furniture covered in dust, toys left behind, rooms frozen in time. Trauma does not disappear. It goes underground and grows in the dark. The monster was never a stranger. It was always something that lived inside the house. Number 2. The film influenced decades of horror cinema. It is genuinely difficult to overstate how much Deep Red has influenced the horror films that came after it. The visual grammar Argento developed, the killer's eye view camera shots, the sudden intrusion of extreme violence into everyday settings, the use of music as an instrument of terror, the layered mystery structure, these became foundational elements of the modern horror genre. The slasher films of the late 1970s and 1980s owe a considerable debt to the Italian giallo tradition that Argento mastered. Directors as different as John Carpenter, Brian De Palma, and Wes Craven have acknowledged the impact of Argento's work on their own. Some borrowed specific techniques, others absorbed the broader philosophy that a horror film could be artistically ambitious without betraying its genre roots. Film students around the world still watch Deep Red in classrooms. It is included in serious discussions of the greatest films of the 1970s. The stories that scare us most are the ones that teach us most. Number 1. The film's ending was the most debated part of production. And now we arrive at number 1, the most powerful secret behind Deep Red. The final revelation was the most contested and debated element of the entire production. Argento had a specific vision for the ending, but getting there required fighting through enormous resistance. Some members of the production wanted something cleaner and more conventional, a proper conclusion with all loose threads tied neatly. Argento refused. He believed that the best horror endings do not resolve cleanly. They unsettle. They leave you with questions rather than answers. They mirror the experience of real trauma, which also never fully resolves. The final image of Deep Red connects back to something seen much earlier in the film, creating a circular structure that suggests the story has not ended so much as folded back on itself. There is triumph in it, but there is also horror, and the two are inseparable. When audiences saw it for the first time, cinemas went absolutely silent. Not the silence of confusion, but the silence of people who have been deeply affected and need a moment before they can speak. Argento fought for that silence. He knew it was worth fighting for. The ending nobody wanted to approve was the ending no one ever forgot. Bonus fact: the lost opening scene that changed everything here is the story that almost no one knows. When Argento first began shooting Deep Red, there was an extended opening sequence filmed but never used in the final version. This sequence established the backstory of the killer in much more direct terms, showing specific events from years earlier that explained exactly how the murderous psychology at the heart of the film had developed. The footage was shot. The performances were captured. The sequence existed. And then Argento watched it and realized it was wrong. Not technically wrong. Not poorly performed, but wrong in a deeper sense. It explained too much. It answered questions before the audience had a chance to ask them, before the mystery had built to the point where the answers could truly land. Argento made the decision to remove the sequence entirely and restructured the opening to drop the audience directly into a world where something terrible had already happened without explaining how or why. The effect was electric. Viewers were immediately disoriented, immediately alert, immediately hungry for understanding. They leaned forward from the very first moments and never fully settled back in their seats. The removed footage was archived, but has never been officially released or included in any home video edition. Film historians and dedicated fans know it existed because of production documents and crew accounts, but the actual footage remains locked away. There is something deeply appropriate about a film built on hidden truths containing its own hidden truth, a secret buried before anyone could see it. Some doors are better left closed. Some truths are more powerful when they remain just out of reach. Old instincts, braver choices, and a masterpiece was born in what was left unseen. Deep Red is more than a horror film. It is a film about the things we cannot bear to look at directly, the wounds from our past, the violence we try to forget, the truths that hide in plain sight while we stare past them. Dario Argento made it with passion, stubbornness, and an absolute refusal to take the easy path. The music, the colors, the city of terrain, the courage of the actors. Everything came together to create something that still speaks powerfully nearly 50 years later. What makes Deep Red truly remarkable is not just how it frightens you. It is how it stays with you. Days after watching it, you find yourself thinking about that house, that doll, that final image. That is the real gift of great cinema. It changes the way you look at the world long after the screen goes dark. If you enjoyed these stories, please subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth underneath its surface, and we will keep uncovering them, one story at a time.